Meet Dylan Avery, 23 years old, lives in New York. Like most 20-something-year-olds, he has a MySpace. Unlike most 20-something-year-olds, he could not drop out of college because he was never accepted. If he were anybody else, no one on this planet would give 2 squirts of piss for him, but Dylan is known for one thing and one thing only. He is responsible for the Loose Change movies. Loose Change has become the biggest internet movie ever, surpassing the Paris Hilton video by about 2 million hits. Loose Change started out as a fictional piece about friends who discovered 9/11 was an inside job. He claims to have spent 3 years researching the content of the film and decided to make it after a pep talk with James Gandolfini. That's right, he claims Tony Soprano gave him advice on how to get into the movies. I call bullshit since the only advice Tony Soprano gives is in the form of broken kneecaps. However, Dylan started believing his own bile, and soon Loose Change went from a fictional story to a fictional account of the government's involvement in 9/11 attacks. The original Loose Change was released on April in 2005. After that, Loose Change 2nd edition was released in November. Too bad this film, and I use that word loosely, that was 3 years in the making and was dedicated to the lives we lost on September 11th, does the victims no justice whatsoever.
Fuck you! Fuck you! Fuck you! Fuck
First, in an interview with Jack Blood on Deadline Live, Dylan let the world know what he would do in the event of a hijacking. In his own words,
if I was on a flight with, at least 50 other people, because that's the smallest number I think that was on 9/11, if I was in a cabin with 50 other people, and 5 people, I don't care if they're Muslim or not, stand up with boxcutters and say they're going to hijack the plane, I'm going to laugh in their face.
50 people behind him, and he would laugh in their face. While this does show his bravado, one can only question what he would do if there were, say, 20 people on board with him. Then what? We looked to a televised debate on the show Hardfire for a possible answer. The Hardfire debate lasted 57 minutes and pitted known 9/11 debunker and all-around good guy Mark Roberts against Dylan and his right nut Jason Burmis. During this debate, Dylan spoke for a grand total of 5 minutes and 17 seconds. He spent 51 minutes staring at God knows what off screen. This leads one to conclude that in the event of an aircraft hijacking, as long as there's at least 50 other people behind him, Dylan Avery will turn into Billy Jack. Put him on stage with 3 other people and some television cameras, and he turns into a statue. How many versions of the truth do we need? A lot, obviously. The original Loose Change claimed that there was a pod on the first plane to hit the World Trade Center and that $167 billion in gold was stolen from the vaults underneath. It also claims that a B-52 hit the World Trade Center. The pod was claimed to have been the, quote, smoking gun, unquote, that blew the whole investigation open. If that was the case, there was no need to release a second version a mere 7 months later. This new version omitted the pod and the gold, and now based a smoking gun on the phone calls from the airplanes. In all, Loose Change 2nd edition contained 86 factual errors in 1 hour and 22 minutes, or a little over 1 error per minute. The ironic thing is, Dylan chastises people on his own forum for not being responsible researchers. He sells DVDs on his site for $17 and recommends that you copy it yourself and distribute it in his spare time. I guess that's to cut down on cost of production, but then again, big screen TVs don't buy themselves. Let's talk about his forums for a second. Dylan has stated numerous times that he's using his film to, quote, just ask questions, unquote. But in a flyer for his film it says that it shows that the government was behind the attacks. How is it possible to ask questions if you already know the answer? You can ask questions on his forums as long as you're an inside jobber. Ask Dylan which victims were secondary, and you get banned. His forum also has a 25 and under category that 23-year-old Dylan does not post in. Also, if you want to perform violence on a person who does not believe 9/11 was an inside job, Dylan will be kind enough to inform the would-be assailant where to find the target of the would-be aggression. Depending on what kind of question you ask him, you might get a response. Here are 2 instances of what I'm talking about. In a message over MySpace, I asked if Loose Change Final Cut will actually contain facts. He replied, but didn't answer the question. Note the URL for my MySpace account. Next, I sent Dylan an email. Note the email address. His reply was much more cordial when I asked him if the military knew the attacks were imminent because of the numerous training exercises we were going through prior to 9/11. If he would have just done some of that expert research, he would have caught on to the similarities, but I guess he overlooked it. It's safe to say he'll listen to you as long as you think the government is behind everything. Lastly, let's talk about his respect to the victims, in particular, Bernard Brown Jr. Remember, his film was dedicated in part to him. Like any DVD released as of late, Loose Change comes with extra footage. In this case, Dylan talks about Bernard dying after his plane hit the Pentagon. The only thing is, Bernard was an 11-year-old boy, and his father worked in the Navy wing. Dylan expressed that he wanted to phone Bernard's father, not to discuss his son's death and the impact it had on the family, but to
See if anything slips.
about 9/11 and talk with him about
Sending his son to die.
In closing, Dylan's quest to expose the government's execution of the terrorist attacks has led him to make not 1 but 2 movies filled to the brim with lies and has him mocking the victims. I expect more of the same when Loose Change Final Cut is released. Oddly enough, Dylan is teamed with billionaire Mark Cuban for a theatrical release of the Final Cut. Too bad Cuban himself doesn't believe a word of the film. Dylan, if you really wanted to honor the victims, if you really want to help expose the truth you keep looking for but will never find, if you have any inkling of self-respect for the lives we lost that tragic day, the best thing for you to do is simply shut the fuck up.
Well, my dad was a wise man.